For more than a decade, a stretch of sand on Long Island held a terrifying secret. This place, a quiet, wind-swept expanse of dunes and crashing waves, held a darkness that no one could see, but everyone could sense. The whispers of the ocean carried echoes of unspeakable acts, as if the tides themselves bore witness to the horrors buried beneath the sands. Each gust of wind seemed to be asking the same haunting question: who is responsible? Families, shattered by unanswered prayers and unspoken grief, mourned silently. Their loved ones' faces faded from newscasts, but their memories remained. Investigators, driven by determination and haunted by failure, pursued shadows through a maze of clues that appeared to lead nowhere. What about the community? They lived under a cloud of unease, fearful that the monster responsible for these acts might be among them, a neighbor, a coworker, or someone they passed on the street. The case became colder as the days turned into months, and then years. Leads have dried up. Promises of justice faded. What started as an urgent search turned into a bleak routine, with more questions than answers and no sign of resolution. The sand, brush, and dunes became a silent graveyard, where secrets were buried and the truth seemed doomed to remain hidden forever. But now, after more than a decade of unanswered questions, the truth has finally come to light. A truth that shook not just a community, but an entire nation. The mystery that lingered in the shadows for years now has a name, a face, and a story that chills to the core. On July 13, 2023, Rex Heuermann, a seemingly ordinary architect from Massapequa Park, was arrested and charged in connection with the Gilgo Beach murders. The man who had lived quietly among his neighbors for years, unsuspected, was now at the center of one of the most harrowing criminal cases in modern history. This revelation sent shockwaves through the nation, leaving a trail of disbelief and horror in its wake. How could a man like Rex Heuermann, an educated professional, a husband, a father, be accused of such unspeakable acts? A man who built homes and structures in the daylight was now alleged to have torn lives apart in the shadows. How could someone who blended so seamlessly into suburban life, a man described by neighbors as quiet and unremarkable, harbor a darkness capable of committing crimes so extraordinary in their cruelty? The nation was left grappling with this stark contrast, the exterior of normalcy against the alleged brutality beneath. The shock wasn't just in the crimes themselves, but in the chilling realization that the predator had lived among them, unseen and unsuspected, for so long. Multiple bodies were discovered along this desolate stretch of sand, their stories bound by fear, tragedy, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Each discovery painted a grim picture of a cryptic killer who was methodical, calculated, and unrelenting. This was someone who left behind almost nothing, no clear evidence, no witnesses, only questions and grief that lingered like a shadow over the community. For over a decade, investigators poured their hearts and minds into the case, chasing elusive leads, sifting through fragments of evidence, and reconstructing a puzzle that seemed impossible to solve. They faced dead ends, false starts, and years of frustration, but they never stopped. And then, finally, there was a breakthrough. But what was it? What was the single thread that unraveled a mystery that had haunted so many for so long? What could drive someone to commit such unspeakable acts? What depths of darkness exist within a person who can commit atrocities so calculated and cruel? And how does someone live a double life so flawlessly that even those closest to them, family, friends, neighbors, are left reeling, questioning everything they thought they knew? But the most pressing question remains. What was it that finally led investigators to Rex Heuermann? Was it a single critical mistake, a slip in an otherwise meticulous plan? Was it a piece of evidence that had been overlooked for years, lying dormant until the right eye saw it? Or was it the relentless persistence of investigators, fueled by determination and perhaps a stroke of luck, that finally broke the case wide open? These are the questions we'll seek to answer today, as we unravel the haunting story of the Gilgo Beach serial killer. To grasp the full weight of this chilling case, the fear it inspired, the lives it shattered. We must journey back to where it all began. Back to the first discovery that transformed this quiet, unassuming stretch of sand into the epicenter of one of the most infamous and perplexing murder investigations in American history. As you follow this story, we want to hear from you. What stands out to you as the most disturbing part of this case? Could these tragedies have been prevented? Or was the killer's methodical precision simply too calculated to unravel until now? Share your thoughts, your theories, and your questions in the comments below. Your voice matters in understanding the impact of cases like this. In 2010, a routine search for a missing woman unraveled into one of the most horrifying discoveries in Long Island's history. On December 11th, officers combing the sandy dunes along Ocean Parkway for 24-year-old Shannon Gilbert encountered something they never expected. Instead of finding Shannon, they uncovered the remains of 4 other women. Each body had been carefully wrapped in burlap, concealed with deliberate precision, and each represented a tragic story waiting to be unearthed. What began as a search for one missing person became the opening chapter of a chilling and complex mystery that would haunt the region for years to come. These bodies were not Shannon Gilbert's. Yet their discovery unveiled the sinister truths buried within Gilgo Beach, truths that had remained hidden for years. This moment marked the beginning of a terrifying chapter in American crime history and introduced the world to a name that would send chills through the community: the Long Island serial killer. The grim reality of multiple lives lost forever altered the quiet shores of Long Island and ignited a hunt for answers that would span more than a decade. As investigators began piecing together the evidence, the case grew darker and more perplexing with every turn. More questions surfaced than answers, each one more haunting than the last. How many victims were there? Was this the work of one person? Or could there be more than one predator using this desolate stretch of road? Why had these women been brought to such an isolated location? And what drew the killer to this particular place? Most chilling of all, who could commit such calculated, heartless acts, carrying them out with a precision that evaded detection for so long? With more than 10 victims eventually linked to the case, the scope of the Gilgo Beach murders expanded into a sprawling and deeply unsettling mystery. Over the years, countless suspects surfaced, each bringing a new layer of intrigue and speculation. The case became one of the most perplexing and haunting in modern criminal history, leaving investigators grasping for answers as the years stretched on. It wasn't just the families of the victims who were consumed by this tragedy. The horror rippled through the community, paralyzing it with fear, and soon captivated the attention of the entire nation. The sheer complexity of the crimes, combined with the chilling elusiveness of the killer, made this a story that no one could turn away from. How does a killer manage to operate undetected for so many years? Is it the careful planning of a meticulous predator, or are there cracks in the system that allow such horrors to persist? What keeps cases like these shrouded in mystery for over a decade, despite advancements in technology and relentless efforts by investigators? We want to hear your thoughts. What do you believe is the biggest obstacle in solving cases like this? Is it the complexity of the crimes, the nature of the evidence, or something deeper? Share your opinions and theories in the comments below. Your perspective matters. In any story of tragedy, it is the victims whose lives and voices deserve to be remembered. The Gilgo Beach murders are no exception. Each victim was someone's daughter, friend, or loved one, each with dreams, struggles, and lives cut tragically short. Let's begin with Shannon Gilbert, the young woman whose disappearance set this entire case into motion. Shannon was 24 years old, a spirited and creative woman from Jersey City. Despite facing significant hardships, including financial struggles, Shannon held on to big dreams. She hoped to one day leave behind the escort work that had become her means of survival. On the night of May 1st, 2010, Shannon visited a client in the Oak Beach area. But something went terribly wrong. At 4:51 a.m., she made a frantic 911 call, claiming someone was trying to kill her. By the time police arrived, Shannon had vanished. In December of that same year, a K-9 unit searching the brush along Ocean Parkway for Shannon made a discovery they could never have imagined. Among the dunes lay the remains of another woman, carefully wrapped in burlap. As the search expanded, 3 more bodies were uncovered, all in the same condition, all carefully concealed within the same area. These victims were later identified as Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello. Like Shannon, each of these women had been reported missing, each had been involved in escort work, and all had vanished under disturbingly similar circumstances. Melissa Barthelemy was a 24-year-old from Buffalo, New York. Petite and full of ambition, Melissa had dreams of becoming a hairstylist and moved to the Bronx in search of a fresh start. Her family described her as vibrant and determined. In July 2009, she disappeared after arranging to meet a client. Weeks later, her family began receiving taunting phone calls from an unidentified man who had taken Melissa's cell phone. Megan Waterman, just 22 years old, was a devoted mother from Scarborough, Maine. Those who knew her described her as kind, strong, and fiercely devoted to her daughter. Megan had turned to escort work to make ends meet. In June 2010, she disappeared from a hotel in Hauppauge, Long Island, after meeting a client. Amber Lynn Costello, 27, was a spirited and outgoing woman from North Babylon, New York. Despite her struggles with addiction, Amber was cherished by those who knew her. She vanished in September 2010 after leaving her home for what she described as just a quick job. She never returned. By the time their remains were discovered, a chilling term had emerged in the media: the Long Island serial killer. Yet, even as these 4 women were identified, the mystery only deepened. As the search efforts widened, more bodies and remains were uncovered in the surrounding areas. This raised alarming and chilling questions. Were all of these murders connected? And if so, who could be capable of such calculated and remorseless acts of violence? Ocean Parkway became the epicenter of the investigation. This desolate stretch of road, flanked by dunes and thick brush, seemed an ideal dumping ground for a killer who operated in the shadows. Its isolation and limited visibility offered the kind of secrecy the perpetrator likely sought. Investigators were left wondering, was this the work of one person, a group, or someone who blended so seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life that they were able to carry out these acts unnoticed for years? What do you think? Could one person orchestrate such a calculated series of crimes, or does this case suggest something even more sinister? Share your theories in the comments below. The discoveries along Ocean Parkway painted a deeply disturbing picture, one that grew more horrifying with each passing month. The first 4 victims, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Lynn Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes, shared unsettling similarities. Each woman worked as an escort, each vanished after arranging to meet a client, and all were found carefully wrapped in burlap. This burlap became a grim signature, a chilling marker of the killer's methods. The placement of the bodies was no coincidence. Each was found within a few hundred feet of the other, meticulously concealed along the brush lining Ocean Parkway. This calculated proximity suggested a killer intimately familiar with the area, someone comfortable navigating its isolated stretches, even in the dead of night. But as investigators expanded their search, the scope of the horror widened. In March and April of 2011, 6 additional sets of human remains were uncovered, bringing the total number of victims to at least 10. Some remains were partial skeletons, while others appeared to belong to victims killed years earlier, long before Shannon Gilbert's disappearance. The discoveries in 2011 added new and haunting details. Among them was a toddler, later identified as the child of one of the victims, Valerie Mack. Another set of remains belonged to a man, a stark departure from the previous pattern. These findings raised troubling questions about the killer's motives and whether more than one perpetrator might be involved. By 2011, The body count had climbed to double digits. Victims like Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack were identified through painstaking forensic work, but several remained Jane Does, their names and stories lost to time. Despite their differences, one chilling common thread tied them together: Ocean Parkway, a desolate and secretive dumping ground. For law enforcement, the challenges were immense. The secluded nature of the area meant there were few, if any, witnesses. The killer's methods were calculated, leaving little forensic evidence behind. Even the burlap wrappings, likely chosen for their durability, yielded no discernible DNA. Phone records, often a critical investigative tool, were of little help due to the use of burner phones, a detail that highlighted the killer's meticulous planning. The isolation of Ocean Parkway worked against investigators in other ways. The dense brush and lack of regular foot traffic made it an ideal location for concealing crimes. Compounding this was the discreet nature of the victim's work, which often left minimal traces of their final movements. Together, these factors created a perfect storm, one that kept the killer's identity shrouded in mystery for more than a decade. As more remains were uncovered, theories began to circulate. Was this the work of one highly methodical predator, or had multiple perpetrators used this remote stretch of Long Island to hide their crimes? The similarities between the victims suggested a single individual, yet the diversity of remains discovered in 2011 raised questions that even seasoned investigators struggled to answer. What do you think? Could this have been the work of one person, meticulously planning every detail? Or is it possible that more than one predator operated in this secluded part of Long Island? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. The investigation into the Gilgo Beach murders was one of the most challenging cases in modern law enforcement history. From the very beginning, critical obstacles hindered progress, leaving the victims' families and the public increasingly frustrated. One of the first hurdles was the overlapping jurisdictions. The area where the remains were found fell under the purview of multiple law enforcement agencies, including the Suffolk County Police Department, the Nassau County Police Department, and state authorities. This lack of clear jurisdiction created delays and miscommunication, preventing a cohesive investigation during the crucial early stages. Public frustration grew as the months turned into years with no arrests. Families of the victims accused law enforcement of failing to prioritize the case. Many pointed to the victims' involvement in escort work, questioning whether societal biases had slowed the urgency of the investigation. Despite these challenges, investigators pressed on, though progress was painstakingly slow. With limited forensic evidence and no eyewitnesses, every lead seemed to run into a dead end. But as technology advanced, so did the tools available to law enforcement. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from revisiting phone records. Early in the investigation, it was discovered that the killer had used burner phones to contact the victims, arranging meetings and, in some cases, taunting the victims' families. These phones were carefully chosen to avoid detection, but the meticulous reanalysis of call patterns, locations, and timing eventually provided crucial clues. In 2022, a newly formed task force re-examined old evidence with fresh eyes. Combining advancements in forensic DNA analysis with geolocation data, investigators began to see patterns that had previously gone unnoticed. These efforts finally led them to a suspect, Rex Heuermann. Rex Heuermann was an architect based in Massapequa Park, just a short drive from Gilgo Beach. At first glance, he seemed like an unremarkable suburban professional, but investigators quickly discovered connections that were anything but ordinary. Phone records placed Heuermann near the locations where the burner phones had been used to contact victims. Further investigation revealed his peculiar behavior, patterns of activity that aligned disturbingly well with the timeline of the murders. Investigators also found evidence that directly linked him to burlap fibers used in the killings, as well as hairs that tied back to his wife, suggesting the killer's effort to mislead authorities. After over a decade of frustration and heartbreak, investigators had finally narrowed their search to one man. The arrest of Rex Heuermann in July 2023 marked a turning point in one of the most perplexing cases in American criminal history. What do you think about the investigation? Could these murders have been solved sooner? Or were the challenges simply too great to overcome in those early years? Drop your thoughts in the comments. After years of unanswered questions, the case that had gripped the nation finally reached a pivotal moment. On July 13, 2023, Rex Heuermann, a 59-year-old architect from Massapequa Park, was arrested and charged with 3 of the Gilgo Beach murders. The charges stemmed from the killings of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amberlynn Costello. A Suffolk County grand jury formally indicted Heuermann, citing substantial evidence linking him to these murders. Forensic breakthroughs, including DNA recovered from burlap wrappings and hairs, played a critical role in the case. Geolocation data from burner phones placed him at key locations tied to the victims. Law enforcement credited the arrest to relentless efforts and advances in technology. Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison stated, "This was the result of tireless work, new technology, and a commitment to justice for the victims and their families." The news of Heuermann's arrest sent shockwaves through the quiet neighborhood of Massapequa Park, where residents were stunned to learn that a man living among them had been charged with such heinous crimes. Many expressed disbelief that someone they described as quiet and ordinary could harbor such dark secrets. For the families of the victims, the arrest brought a mix of emotions. There was relief that justice was finally within reach, but also renewed grief as the details of the case were brought back into the public spotlight. Some families expressed gratitude for the efforts of investigators, while others questioned why it had taken so long to reach this point. While many celebrated the arrest as a long overdue breakthrough, there were still unanswered questions. Could Heuermann be responsible for more than the 3 murders he was charged with? And what about the other remains found along Ocean Parkway that had yet to be tied to any suspect? As investigators continued to work on uncovering the full scope of the case, the community was left grappling with the chilling reality that such a dangerous individual had lived among them for so long. Was this truly the end of the mystery, or just the beginning of another chapter? The case against Rex Heuermann rested on a mountain of evidence meticulously gathered over years of painstaking investigation. Key among this evidence was the forensic work that tied him directly to the murders. DNA played a pivotal role. On the burlap wrappings used to conceal the bodies of the victims, investigators discovered hairs that would later be identified as belonging to Heuermann's wife. These hairs weren't placed by her, but rather transferred during the crimes, a chilling indication of how calculated the killer had been in attempting to avoid leaving his DNA at the scenes. Additionally, DNA matching Heuermann himself was recovered from the burlap used to wrap one of the victims. This forensic evidence, combined with cell phone geolocation data and witness accounts, created a compelling case that placed him at the center of the investigation. Beyond the evidence, investigators were struck by the stark contrast between Heuermann's outward life and the crimes he was accused of committing. Rex Heuermann was a married father of 2 and a licensed architect. He ran a Manhattan-based architectural firm and appeared, to most who knew him, to be an ordinary suburban professional. But beneath this facade, investigators allege, lay a man living a dark and sinister double life. Heuermann's neighbors described him as quiet, often reserved. He lived in a modest house in Massapequa Park, just miles from where the bodies were discovered. To those around him, he seemed unremarkable, just another face in the crowd. But law enforcement painted a very different picture. Investigators alleged that Heuermann used burner phones not only to contact the victims, but also to evade detection. The same phones were later traced to taunting calls made to Melissa Barthelemy's family. Calls designed to inflict emotional pain, further underscoring the calculated cruelty of the crimes. This duality, a family man on one side and an alleged serial killer on the other, shocked those who knew him. One colleague remarked, "He was quiet, maybe a little odd, but nothing about him screamed danger." Others in the community expressed disbelief, saying, "We never thought something like this could happen here." The evidence, both forensic and circumstantial, painted a picture of a man who carefully planned his crimes, operating under the radar for over a decade. A man who hid in plain sight, leading a double life that shocked everyone who thought they knew him. How does someone live two lives so convincingly? How does a person commit such horrific crimes while maintaining the appearance of normalcy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. While the arrest of Rex Heuermann provided a sense of closure for many, the case remains far from fully resolved. There are lingering mysteries that still cast a shadow over the Gilgo Beach investigation. One of the most unsettling aspects is the possibility of additional victims. As investigators continued their search, they uncovered remains that had not been conclusively tied to Heuermann. These victims, whose identities remain unknown, could represent a chilling truth. There may still be more bodies waiting to be discovered along this remote stretch of Long Island. Could the Long Island serial killer have claimed more victims, their remains hidden just out of sight? And if so, how many? These are questions that have yet to be answered, leaving many wondering whether this case truly represents the full extent of the killer's crimes. Another chilling question remains: was Rex Heuermann working alone? Given the number of victims, the calculated nature of the crimes, and the pattern of the killings, investigators have not ruled out the possibility of accomplices, someone who helped him or enabled him in some way. And with so much time passed, there may have been missed opportunities in the investigation that could have led to his capture sooner. The arrest of Heuermann sent shockwaves through the community of Massapequa Park and the surrounding areas. For years, residents had lived in fear, haunted by the possibility that the killer was one of their own neighbors. Now, with the arrest, many experienced a strange mixture of relief and dread. Relief that justice might finally be served, but dread over the unsettling realization that such a killer could be so close. Beyond the immediate community, the Gilgo Beach case also had a profound impact on law enforcement practices. The investigation was one of the first to fully embrace the power of DNA technology, burner phone data, and other modern forensic tools that allowed investigators to make breakthroughs that were unimaginable just a decade ago. The case showed just how critical it is to revisit cold cases with fresh eyes, especially as new technology emerges. This case has set a new standard for how cold cases are handled nationwide. The combination of advances in technology and the tireless efforts of law enforcement has inspired other investigators to revisit unsolved murders, hoping for the same kind of breakthroughs seen in the Gilgo Beach case. For the families of the victims, the arrest of Rex Heuermann brought mixed emotions. On one hand, there was the long-awaited sense of justice. For years, they had fought for answers, clinging to hope even when there was no clear path forward. But on the other hand, the arrest reopened the painful wounds of loss. For some families, it brought them face to face with the haunting reality of the killer's brutality and the toll it had taken on their lives. The families of the victims shared their thoughts through statements and press conferences, each one expressing their relief that the man responsible had been identified, while also acknowledging that their pain would never truly go away. One family member of a victim said, "While we've waited for this day for so long, it doesn't erase the years of agony, the years of not knowing. But today, we know that our loved ones won't be forgotten." As the case continues, the families are left to rebuild their lives, forever changed by the horrific events that unfolded along Ocean Parkway. Yet, with each step forward, there is a sense of closure, a sense that justice is being served, one piece of the puzzle at a time. The arrest of Rex Heuermann marked a critical turning point in the Gilgo Beach case, offering a long-awaited sense of closure for some and raising even more questions for others. But even with the progress made, one thing is clear. While one chapter of this chilling saga may be closing, the full truth might still be out there. Could there be more victims still waiting to be discovered? Could there be details yet uncovered that might shed light on how such a calculated killer operated for so long? And what lessons can we learn to prevent such horrors from happening again? What do you think about the Gilgo Beach serial killer case? Do you believe Rex Heuermann is responsible for all of the murders? Or could there be more to the story? Could this case hold even darker secrets? Share your thoughts below in the comments. We'd love to hear your opinions and theories. And if you're drawn to unraveling more mysteries like this, we've got more for you. For more unsolved mysteries, shocking crimes, and gripping cases, check out our playlist True Crime. You'll find stories that will keep you thinking long after the credits roll. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest deep dive into the most compelling true crime cases. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.